was tricky, right? Because he had so many allegations, and how do you make that something readable as opposed to just a laundry list? I think we tried to do two things. First of all, we tried to show the development, right? And how did he come to be who he was? Was there any kind of development in his harassment of women? You know, did it change over the years? And what we found was that patterns emerged over time. What's interesting is that these patterns have held consistently over decades. Starting in the early 90s or earlier, he had a thing for a young girl, right? He would go into backstage with models, into their dressing rooms and things like that. He likes porn stars. That goes back to the late 80s. He has a habit of allegedly pushing women up against a wall and kissing them or groping them or whatever. And that is something that we saw in the early 1990s, and you're hearing about in more recent years. So we really saw patterns. So we tried to kind of organize the book around these patterns to give it some sort of cohesiveness, but also so you could make sense of these very many random stories. So, I mean, structuring it was challenging because there was so much of it. But the other thing is we did hear allegations that didn't fit into these patterns. And when we heard something that really felt like an outlier, we didn't put it in the book because, it is hard to prove any of these things. And so we really tried to stick to the stories that we felt were very credible. And one story by itself you may question, but when you hear the same story and the same MO over and over and over, you question it less. And so anything that fell outside of those patterns, we didn't really put in the book.
What we ended up with was the totality of this man's predatory behavior over decades. We tried to show where this predatory behavior developed from to some degree. Monique felt very strongly that we get into his time at the military academy, his relationship with his mother and father, the mentorship of Roy Cohen, because all of this was a shaping of Donald Trump.
Hachette,